Okay, hello everyone. So in the previous video, we look at what was the PAP's view on merger. And in this video, we're going to look at what was the Malayan government's view towards merger. In particular, what was Tunku Abdul Rahman's view? Tunku Abdul Rahman, name very important, you must know. He is the Malayan Prime Minister. Okay, Malaya PM. Okay, and what did the Malaya felt about the idea of Singapore being part of the country? Okay, so at first, Malaya was very resistant. Why were they very resistant towards merger? A few things. You can see that first, he was very worried that the Chinese in Singapore will be reluctant to accept a Malay Sultan, a Malay national language, because Malaya was a very Malay centric country. A lot of things are in Malay, Malay leaders, Malay language, and so on, Malay religion, Islam. All right. They are very worried that the Chinese will not accept it. The Chinese will not fit in well. Maybe it will create trouble. Okay. And more importantly, he's very worried. We are a Malay country now. If Singapore join Malaya, Malaya may no longer become a Malay country. Why is that? Okay, because if you look at the graph here, you have seen this before, okay, in your project. Currently, if you look at the first part, Federation of Malaya, there are more Malays than Chinese, 1 million, about 1 million more. But if Singapore join, okay, there will be more Chinese than Malays. A Malay country will basically become like a Chinese country because there are more Chinese. Maybe they'll scrap the Malay language. Maybe they'll scrap the Malay king and make it into Chinese language country. So he was very concerned that the racial makeup or the proportion of the races would change. Okay. And he suspected many Chinese were sympathetic to the communists. Remember, we talked about this in the previous video. The communists wanted to take over these countries by force and run the country in a certain way. Okay, so he was very worried that the Chinese are very close to these communist people and they are up to no good. That is why he's so scared of having more Chinese in the country if Singapore joins in. Okay, and so he was very resistant with the idea at first, but later you will see he changed his idea because, and you can see in this graph here, if I bring in more territories, that means not just Singapore, I add in other things like North Borneo, Sarawak, bring in more countries to join Malaya, I can make Malay more than Chinese again. And that will be a better solution, better arrangement than just having Singapore where the Chinese outweigh the Malay. Okay, so that is for later. Okay, so what were some reasons why Malaya was so against Singapore? I mentioned a few things already. Okay, so the first thing is because Tunku Abdul Rahman later, okay, agree. So Tunku, okay, Malaya started, okay, to accept merger. Why did he change his mind? At first, we said he was very resistant. Why did he start to accept merger? Three reasons you can see here, 3 points here. You cannot remember the few points, maybe try to remember 1 or 2 points, but I'll briefly describe it. Okay, so the first reason Tunku decided to accept merger is because he's very scared Singapore will fall to the communists. Okay, communists influence Singapore. Okay, so basically he's very worried that communist Singapore may lead to communist Malaya. If Singapore was left on its own, the communists can take over the country. Okay, so let's see. He's very concerned that that the PAP might be taken over by the members who are sympathetic towards the communism. That means the communists will take over the PAP and take over the Singapore government. And after that, it might spread communism to Malaya. So that was his main concern. Okay. And to prevent that, he realized that if Singapore become less dangerous if we are part of Malaysia. That means if Singapore join Malaya, the government can help to fight the communists because the government have experience fighting the communists during the Malaya. That means Malayan government can have troops to help to fight the communists. So better to fight the communists together than let Singapore fall to the communists. The communists get very strong, and one day the communists want to threaten Malaya. Okay, so that is the key idea. Okay, don't let Singapore turn communist. Malaya take Singapore, defend Singapore from the communists, and fight the communists together. So that is the first reason why Tunku and Malaya started to accept merger. Okay, accept Singapore, we can defend Singapore from the communists. Second sign that make Malaya very worried, okay, and make them want to do merger was this thing called the Hong Lim by-election. What is this Hong Lim by-election? It's basically quite the same point as above. The Malaya was very scared that Singapore will fall to the communists, and there were signs that it was happening. How do I know? Because in Singapore back then, there was this guy called Ong Eng Guan. So Ong challenged the PAP leadership. So at first he was part of the PAP, but after he fell out of PAP because he did not he was not following the party direction. So he fell out with the PAP, and he challenged the PAP, and because he got fired from the PAP because the PAP don't like him anymore, there was an election to fill up his seat. Okay, he was ruling one part of the country called one part of the Singapore called Hong Lim, and so they have to have an election to choose a new guy. So the PAP will think, okay, I'll bring in a new guy to replace Mr. Ong. But Mr. Ong contested the election anyway as an independent candidate. That means not as a PAP member, as an independent person. He defeated the PAP candidate very easily. Okay, do you really remember the percentage? I think don't need. But how is this relevant to Malaya? How is this relevant to merger? It's because the Tunku became very worried that there's increasing divide within the PAP. That means the PAP is breaking up. The PAP is losing control of the country. Okay, he's very worried that there's this group of people, the radical group of PAP. That means these people, they are quite extreme. Why are they extreme? They are very worried that they will establish a communist government. They'll take over the PAP or defeat the PAP and set out a new country that is following communist ideas. So Tunku was very afraid of communists. So when they saw Mr. Ong winning the Hong Lim election, he became very worried that the PAP might really lose control of Singapore. Okay, so PAP lose control of SG. There was this fear that PAP will lose control of Singapore. Okay, so in the end, what did Tunku do? He decided, okay, let's have merger. I want to fight the communists for Singapore. So they decided we will form a new federation, and to solve the problem of having too many Chinese, they included territories like North Borneo and Sarawak. They wanted to include Brunei, but Brunei didn't want to join. Okay, so just North Borneo, or today they call it Sabah and Sarawak. Okay, and they eventually come to an agreement, and they decided Singapore will now be part of Malaya, and the new country, they come up with a new name called Malaysia. Okay, so that is how Singapore became part of Malaysia, but not yet. Malaysia agree for Singapore to join, but the people in Singapore still need to accept that they want to be part of Malaya or be part of Malaysia. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to look at the battle for merger, who was against merger, and eventually, why did the PAP won the battle for merger and Singapore became part of Malaysia officially. Okay, so that is for the next